Good evening. It's a great honor to be with you today, and I thank Father Bill for this great opportunity. And I love that God has given us this puzzling parable of the dishonest steward to ponder together on this National Day of Catechetical Sunday. Because this parable is so helpful in clarifying what our role as catechist is and what it is not. We all share in the role of catechist as parents, as grandparents, and believers who wish to effectively share the good news of Jesus. And here is why this parable is so perfectly appropriate for today. Because parables not only reveal what Jesus taught, but also how he taught. The parable in and of itself is a method of teaching. In fact, we could even say it is the method of the teaching of Jesus. With the children in the atrium, we describe a parable as a story with a mystery, not because Jesus wished to hide or conceal something from us, but rather because the mystery of God and God's kingdom is simply too vast, too deep, too beyond our imagination to be captured in mere words. Just as the moon cannot be brought down to earth for us to examine up close and to know and learn about in that way, so too God. A parable is like pointing to the moon, but not the moon itself. Our liturgy has always spoken and catechized through this method of parable. Our sacraments invite us to focus on what we see and feel and touch and hear. The light, the water, the oil that we will celebrate with Joseph Paul today. The gestures, right? The bread and the wine. But then we are urged to reach through these things towards the invisible God who wishes to be known. As St. Augustine says, you see one thing, but you understand another from it. This is an event. A parable is an event, not a transfer of information. We all learn through encountering God through these simple things. We catechists simply set the stage, prepare the time and space, and accompany the one we serve, listening with and giving witness with our lives of the power of this encounter with the living God of love. So with this method in mind, let's look at the parable before us today. It's a doozy. The steward, or the manager, which I think is perhaps a term we can better relate to, the manager knows that losing his job in such a public and humiliating way will surely lead to utter ruin. So he sizes up his situation, has a moment of clarity, and wastes no time executing his sly plan for survival. While he still has the power to make deals with his master's money, he calls each of the debtors in for a one-on-one meeting. Keeping each meeting private might be a clue that something shady's going on. He has each of them acknowledge how much they owe the master and then has them alter the numbers. It's the manager's idea, but the debtors change the amount in their own handwriting. So now they not only owe the manager something, but they're partners in crime. The manager has taught them how to cook the books, but they have gone there willingly. And after he's fired, they will welcome him into their homes, because if they don't, he will out them to the master. And now Jesus comes to the surprise ending, right? He says, and his master commended this dishonest manager for acting shrewdly, prudently, wisely. One of the kids in the atrium last year, after hearing this parable, scrunched up his face and said, "What now, Jesus?" And I, as the catechist, I was right there with him. Is it possible that Jesus meant this compliment in kind of a begrudging way, like the way maybe a Scotland Yard investigator might puff thoughtfully on his pipe at the scene of the crime and say, well, you gotta admit, this guy sure knew what he was doing, right? Maybe. But any way you spin it, despite the manager's questionable motives and ethics, it does appear that Jesus is applauding his sneaky actions. And perhaps we can relate. The manager is probably worried about feeding his kids and paying his mortgage, right? Think about all the incredible lengths that we would go to ensure that our children are fed and housed. I know I could do some pretty shady things. Maybe with this parable, Jesus is asking us if we are as committed and serious about our family's spiritual well-being. It certainly sounds like he's saying that the children of light could take a couple plays from the children of the world's playbook, no? Pointing out how we tend to be very determined and shrewd in the ways of the world, but are not as single-minded, perhaps, and wise when it comes to protecting our spirit. By the way, registration is still open for children's faith formation. It begins this week, just saying. But then some scholars propose that the manager wasn't dishonest at all, and that he was just returning the huge amounts of interest that the master was unjustly charging, winning friends in a kind of Robin Hood sort of a way. In the end, there is no right or wrong way to understand a parable. This is part of Jesus' brilliance, right? There can be no division, no argument, no us and them. We can't control or harness a parable to show that God is on our side or to haughtily instruct others on how to act like a real Christian, because there is no one final and absolute way for a parable to be understood. Reading parables as advice for how to behave is like using riddles to get directions to the airport. And explaining a parable is like pinning down a butterfly. The wings are there, but it is unable to do what it was designed to do. So with that, let's close in good Jesus fashion. A poor wandering mystic reached the outskirts of a village and settled under a tree for the night. Suddenly, a villager came running up to him and said, the stone, give me the stone." "What stone?" asked the mystic. "Last night, God told me in a dream that if I went to the outskirts of the village at dusk, a mystic would give me a stone that would make me rich forever." And the mystic rummaged through his sack, and he pulled out the stone, and he said, "It's probably this one. I found it in the forest yesterday. Here, it's yours if you want it." The man gazed at the stone with wonder. It was the largest diamond in the world, the size of a person's head. He ran home elated. But all night, he tossed and turned in bed. And at sunrise, he went back to the tree, woke the mystic, and returned the diamond, saying, "Please, give me the inner wealth that made it possible for you to give this diamond away."